My name is Richard Jackson. I live on the west side of Chicago. Work downtown Chicago. I'm an immigration services officer with United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. I've lived in Chicago all of my life except for 2001 when I joined the military. And 2012, I was honorably discharged from the U.S. Navy, and I've been living in Chicago ever since. I've been stopped and harassed by the Chicago police, I think about 7 times since I've moved back here. All of the stops were unjustified. I feel like I was profiled each stop. Some of the cases I took to court, and of course I won. All the cases were dismissed. I feel like, if they can stop someone like me who's simply going about his business, not committing any crimes, to stop someone based on what type of car they're driving or how they look or, where they live, I think is a gross abuse of power. And, they have no accountability as far as I'm concerned, because when you file complaints, their superiors simply sweep them under the rug. So I feel like the Chicago police operate with impunity. And I think that's based on, my interaction with them personally. They've not been held accountable. The officers who've profiled me and stopped me have not been held accountable for what they did. I believe it was January 31st of 2016. I had just left the car wash, and I drive a 2014 Chevy Impala. It's black, and the car is a nice car. I feel like, especially when it's clean, it catches the eye. So, on my way home, I was heading east on Augusta Boulevard on the west side of Chicago, about to make a left turn to go north onto, I believe, Thomas. And as I was making a left turn, there was an unmarked police SUV driving towards me. And as I turned, I noticed that as I got down the street a little bit, I noticed that they also turned. And I knew they were police officers because those vehicles, those blue Fords, are unmistakable, even though they're unmarked. So I noticed he pulled behind me, and I kind of figured I would be harassed because I've dealt with this several times before. So, as I got to the stop sign, I noticed they were right behind me pretty much. And, obviously I stopped at the stop sign because, that's what you're supposed to do, but especially if they're behind you, So I made a left turn to go west and turn into the alley that is directly behind my home. And as I turned left and started to turn into the alley, that's when they turned on their lights. And I stopped. So I was stopped basically behind in an alley with everything that's going on with the police and how they've treated minorities. I think stopping someone in an alley is a little bit unnerving. But the officer stopped me behind my home. And, they ordered me to lower all of my windows down. And I did that. One of the officers, there were 4 of them. 4 of them got out of the vehicle. One of the officers ordered me to Well, no, they all, one of them ordered all of my windows down. And one of the officers walked up to my passenger side and stated, what's going on with my tags, is what his words were, I believe. So, well, what do you mean? Because I know that I had just put custom tags on my vehicle, and obviously they're not expired, or, the sticker's not missing or anything. So I didn't know what he meant by that. I said, well, what do you mean? And he says, oh, well, you just put these on here? I said, yes. And that was pretty much the end of that. I guess he figured, I think that kind of set the tone for the traffic stop, because they knew that I was not gonna, I knew why they stopped me. And they knew that I wasn't gonna put up with any violation of my rights. At that point, I guess the lead officer, the officer in charge, I assume he was the officer in charge because he was the driver and he was the one asking me all the questions. But I believe he was a rookie officer because I just feel like he was sort of in training based on his interaction with me. It was, I feel like his interaction was very unpolished. So he gets out of the car and he asked me for my license, registration. I give him those documents. He returns to his car, and I guess he runs the information. Nothing comes back, obviously. Then he decides to come back and hand me my documents and say, have a nice day. Well, for me, that's not acceptable. You are going to explain to me why you stopped me. So when I say, well, why did you stop me? He says, oh, well, you cut me off on left-hand turn. I said, well, I didn't cut you off because you were half a block away when I made a left turn. And then he says, oh, well, you ran the stop sign also. I said, well, if I ran the stop sign, I would imagine you would have immediately turned on your lights, not waited until I got into an alley. So I guess he didn't like me questioning his reasoning for stopping me. So he gets loud and says, are you giving me a hard time or something of that nature? And I said, no, I'm simply trying to figure out why you stopped me. You didn't have a reason to stop me. You're going to give me my documents and send me on my way like you don't have any legal explanation to justify your stop. It doesn't work that way with me. So he proceeds to go back to his vehicle and write citations for me cutting him off on left-hand turn, and what was the other one?
Stop sign.
Oh yeah, the stop sign. So obviously I know these tickets are garbage. So I called an attorney right away, and the attorney got back to me the next day and informed me he would take my case. So I had to pay $500 to the attorney, who I think was outstanding. Only because, not because, he was outstanding because he, I guess, put in the officer's mind at the hearing that this was something that he didn't want to deal with. The officer did not want to stand trial. My attorney asked the court for a trial date. We were going to have him on the stand. He was going to have to explain why he stopped me, what was he doing that day, what was his orders for that day, and he didn't want to do that. So my attorney, I had never, I've been stopped plenty of times before, and I've had many attorneys, but I've never heard an attorney say they wanted a trial for a traffic ticket. So when my attorney stated that, I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, this guy's he's the real deal. So I guess the officer didn't want any parts of that, and like I said, the judge ordered a trial date. I believe it was like February of 2016 or something like that. And when we got to court, of course, the officer was not there. The city's attorney claimed he was out sick that day. Of course, the day that he has court, he's sick. So I feel like, with me filing complaints against him for racial profiling, with at the time was IPRA, which is, I think, just a failed, another failed attempt to hold the police accountable. The case was referred to the Internal Affairs Division of the police department. They didn't even bother to open a case. They, at the time, I believe they were under federal investigation by the Justice Department for their practices. And I guess his superior administratively closed the case. I didn't get any documentation, anything in the mail, an email, a phone call about them doing that. The way I found out that it was administratively closed was me calling them and demanding that they send me something in the mail about the status of my complaint. So having done that, I get the official letter in the mail that states the case was administratively closed. Doesn't say why, but it was administratively closed. So they didn't want to hold him accountable. I guess with the investigation going on, that would have been a bad look, that you were harassing a guy who's done nothing wrong, minding his business, who doesn't have a criminal history, honorably discharged veteran, simply returning home after getting his car washed on a Saturday morning. So I believe they don't have any. They operate with impunity. There's no. I just feel like there's nothing holds. There's no way to hold them accountable unless you sue them. But most attorneys here in Chicago, at least, don't, unless you've been stabbed or beaten up by them or handcuffed or thrown in jail. They're not interested in racial profiling cases. So, we just have to, it seems like we just have to put up with it. I believe they reacted, but they're not used to, I guess, minority citizens in particular, knowing their rights and exercising their rights. I'm not someone who's I'm an honorably discharged veteran. I've fought for my rights. I fought for the rights of my fellow citizens. I'm not going to come home and be a victim of my own rights being violated by anybody. So, they were caught off guard by, a minority exercising his rights and voicing his displeasure with them for attempting to trounce on my rights. So, the officer didn't. Like I said, I believe he was a rookie cop, or at least fairly new on the force, because he was completely thrown off guard by that. My interaction with the police in the past, when that happens, when I exercise my rights, they just kind of say, "Oh, he's one of those guys." But this cop was thrown off by that, and I feel like that's because he was fairly new and he's not. At least on the west side, I feel like most people just take whatever the police do to them, whether it's a justified stop or not. I'm going to exercise my rights, especially when the stop is what I believe to be not a validated traffic stop. My grandparents live on my first floor of my home. It's an apartment house. And the lights were, everyone notices the blue strobe lights. That's an unmistakable feature of the police cars. So my grandmother happened to be going outside to take the trash out into the backyard where we keep one can in the backyard and roll that out whenever the garbage trucks come. So she comes out, just so happens that I'm out there being harassed by the police, and she's wondering, oh, well, who's that? You know, I see her kind of looking over, and she notices that it's my car. So she calls me, and I have to hang up the phone because I don't want them to see any movement or feel like, you know, they're being threatened or whatever, because all it takes is that for them to be able to shoot you and get away with it. So I didn't want to answer any calls or anything, so I just hung up the phone, and I think she kind of understood because she's aware of my interactions with the police in the past, and she knows that for some reason they seem to be drawn to me. So yeah, she was aware of what was going on back there. But it's just an unfortunate situation because that could have gone a different way, and you know, it would have been unfortunate if something would have happened that she would have had to witness that her grandson would be, you know, hurt or fatally injured, just simply minding his business and going about his day. You know, the police have a job to do. I understand that, and in my neighborhood, it might not be particularly the safest neighborhood. But I believe as law enforcement officers, you have to treat everybody with respect. And, you know, policing, I think, if you don't know how to police without violating the rights of the very people that you're sworn to protect, you have a problem. You know, of course, you can be preemptive and you know, look for indicators of crime, but if someone's just minding their business, driving their vehicle that they pay for every month, you don't have a reason to harass that person. You know, you execute the law without violating civil rights. If you can't do that, if you're not able to do that, you might need a new line of work. So I give them a little bit of leeway as far as, you know, because a lot of crime happens in my neighborhood, in the Austin community, period. Every day going home from work, I see an ambulance or a squad car racing up and down wherever. But like I said, that doesn't give you a green light to just indiscriminately harass every citizen in that neighborhood. Everybody living in that neighborhood is not a criminal. You know, I work for the federal government. I have a law enforcement badge also. But I'm not gonna, you know, at the time I didn't work for the immigration service, but I did work for the government, and, you know, I feel like, you know, if the federal government trusts me enough to where, one, they would hire me, and two, they would give me a badge also, then what's your reason for suspecting me of being a criminal? I mean, it's just completely unjustified. Well, initially I called because it had been about a month or so that I hadn't heard anything about the complaint after IPRA informed me that it was forwarded to the Internal Affairs Division. So I called I believe the Records Division of the police department, because I guess they handle the FOIA request or whatever. And I was told that, oh, the officer on the phone said your case was administratively closed. And when I hear that, I'm thinking, oh, the same old same. And, you know, I believe you know, they claim that they did not have any record or audio or video record of the incident, but I find it hard to believe, especially when you're under federal investigation for your practices, I would think that your vehicles, or you would have, I didn't look at the officers to see if they had cameras, because I didn't want any of my movements to make them believe that I was, threatening them or whatever. But I think the process is so flawed. IPRA was a waste of money, I believe. Zero accountability, and when you, the FOIA law is supposed to, sort of guarantee citizens a right to, if a government agency has information on you, you're supposed to be able to get that, especially a police department. And for them to sort of ignore that until I decide to, raise hell about it, I just think that's unacceptable. That's indicative of why they were placed under investigation to begin with. Like I said, they operate with impunity, and that's because there's no systems in place, I believe, that are effective to hold them accountable when they do that, when they violate citizens' rights. Racial profiling is huge here in Chicago. I'm sure other cities. But I just don't feel like there's any transparency at all. The superior officer who closed the case administratively, to offer no reason for doing that signifies to me that you're just, it's the blue line that, they can't cross. They all hold hands with the blue line and keep it strong. It's his job as his superior officer to say, open up an investigation and, make a determination. And I'm sure if there was an investigation, that officer would have been punished. Because if you can't even come to court to, back up your citations, your bogus citations, then you are, you know that what you did was wrong. Legislators should definitely vote for this bill because, if they represent the people and the will of the people, profiling and racism in America right now, in 2018 or even before this, is just unacceptable.